Hi, I'm Brickroad. I've never done a Game of the Year video before because I don't normally play enough new releases in a year to populate a top 10 list, but 2015 is kind of an important milestone. This year, the NES, the gaming system that dominated my childhood, turned 30 years old. This is kind of a big deal because for most American gamers, the NES was the first big thing. That little gray box with the spring-loaded toaster slot and dead-eyed robot is what taught us to love video games. It's kind of a big deal too because I only predate the NES by a couple years, and some of my earliest childhood memories involve playing it. I feel pretty fortunate to have been born when I did. I feel like there's a short window of time in the late 70s and early 80s where a person could grow up right alongside the gaming industry as a whole. I'm a little too young to have been influenced by the glut of consoles and the subsequent crash of '83, but not too old to have dismissed the NES as a kid's toy, even though in a lot of ways that's exactly what it was. Now, I'm not saying that my age makes me any kind of authority on the subject of video games. I am ever a slave to my tastes and biases and how much money my parents were willing to spend on systems and game rentals. But I feel pretty lucky to be able to look back at this art form that I love and not have to say that any particular part of it was before my time. So my Game of the Year video isn't going to be a pick of games from 2015 that I enjoyed. Instead, I'd like to share my Game of the Year for every year for the past 30 years, starting in that faraway time of 1985. No need to keep you in suspense, we're starting with one of the best games on this list, Super Mario Bros. I'd played a lot of games before meeting my first NES, mostly on my dad's Atari 2600, but Super Mario Bros. Is the first place where I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to be playing video games my whole life. Before Super Mario Bros., most video games were arcade-style affairs where you just completed repetitive tasks over and over until you ran out of quarters. But here's a game with a clear and concise goal. Get the flagpole, save the princess, you're the hero. I was hooked right away. The gameplay is so simple that I could wrap my 5-year-old brain around it. Run, jump, bop turtles, magic flowers, swim around the fish, yet it's complex enough that I didn't feel at all ripped off to pay full price for the newest version in 2015. I don't know how many games on this list can really be called timeless, but I think Nintendo has proven that Super Mario Bros. Is. Super Mario Bros. Is memorable to me in part because it's the first video game I truly conquered. The Legend of Zelda is memorable because it's the first video game I wasn't able to conquer alone. It took me and my brother and a few of our friends the better part of a year to finally burn all the bushes and bomb all the walls and find all the things in this game, and every second of it was fresh and exciting. Zelda was really and truly a new dimension of gaming for me. Mastering the full range of action in Mario essentially means you've mastered the game, but mastering the full range of action in Zelda means you're just getting started. Exploring this world means more than just burning bushes. It means setting goals for yourself and making plans to achieve them. Setbacks are a part of the game, and overcoming them is a part of the challenge. In my Adventure LP, I said that game was the granddaddy of the modern action-adventure genre. I still think that statement is technically true, but in practice, Zelda is as far back as most game designers really need to reach. Adventure was first, but Zelda is the blueprint for everything we're still playing today. "1987 saw the Japanese release of Final Fantasy, a game that would go on to define my tastes for decades to come, and which would have made this list if not for the fact that 20 years later, I discovered NetHack. It's hard to summarize what NetHack is about in the space I have here, so I'll just go with one word: imagination. The game has no graphics or sound, your brain has to supply those for you, and solutions to the problems you face while playing are seldom straightforward. Your brain has to supply those too. The game rewards creativity, knowledge, organization, and good decision making. What really seals the deal, though, is that NetHack doesn't meet you halfway. It's not that it actively hates you, it just lays out the rules and expects you to learn and play by them. I actively spoiled myself on the game's rules and mechanics, and it still took me well over 100 characters to finally secure the coveted amulet. And when I did, I realized I'd still only seen a fraction of the game. Sorry, Final Fantasy, you just don't have that kind of staying power.
They've got the right idea.
Get out of my dreams. Get into my car.
Nintendo Hard is a term applied to old games that means brutal or unfair levels of difficulty. Lots of early NES games went in that direction, notably Castlevania and its imitators. Often these games could only be cleared through rote memorization, or worse, pure dumb luck. But in 1988, Capcom released a Nintendo Hard title which took the concept in a bit of a different direction. In Bionic Commando, the challenge isn't overcoming a brutal set of levels by trial and error. It's mastering one core gameplay mechanic with a brutally steep difficulty curve. Unlike other platformers, the hero in Bionic Commando can't jump. Instead, he has a mechanical arm he uses to grab, grapple, and swing his way through the levels. The first map in the game is a huge open area with lots of ledges and few threats, and beginning players will spend hours there practicing the maneuvers that the game will eventually demand of them. And that's what makes it so memorable. The game seems clunky and unfair at first, but determined players enjoy a sweet aha moment when the bionic arm mechanics click into place. After that, the game becomes fluid and fast-paced, an absolute blast to play. The bionic arm was the first outside-the-box game mechanic I had encountered as a gamer, and to this day it's sort of my video game comfort food. Look at all these buttons, just look at them. I don't know how I ended up with a copy of the SNES port of Populism, but I sure didn't have the instruction manual, and these buttons were just one of the many layers of madness this game possessed. No strategy guide, no game facts, just me and a controller and weeks of trial and error. Maybe pointing out how weird and inscrutable the game is isn't making Populism sound very enjoyable. Here's the rub, I did figure it out. I learned what all these buttons did, and what the mechanics are, and what the general strategy is, just by playing the game and interpreting its feedback. Maybe I wouldn't have if I hadn't been a stubborn kid, or if I had access to more than 3 SNES games, or if the game didn't have deliciously charming levels where all the buildings were made of cakes or Game Boys. But the perfect storm of these conditions made the game really memorable. It didn't exactly spur a lifelong love of simulation god games, but it's the first game I really had to buckle down and learn how to play.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
The Mega Man series was one of the earliest shining beacons of respite amidst the ocean of Nintendo Hard back in the 90s. Mega Man has a huge health bar, which means you can make a lot of mistakes before getting a game over. As a result, the games were way more accessible to kids and impatient adults than many of its contemporaries. The gameplay style is so fun and forgiving that the Blue Bombers spawned 5 sequels on the NES alone. Of those, Mega Man 3 is still my favorite. It's the first one I played, so yeah, nostalgia blinders and all that, but I really do think it's the best game in the classic series. By now, all the rough edges from the first 2 games had been sanded away, but the series hadn't yet become rote and predictable. They also increased the number of energy tanks Mega Man can carry, allowing stuck players to break through bottlenecks they otherwise wouldn't have cleared, and they added Rush Jet, which lets them skip any screen they find too hard or too annoying. Playing Mega Man 3 back in 1990 not only gave me a game I could actually complete as a snot-nosed little brat, but introduced me to a series I would spend the next 15 years loving. It's also the game that kicked off this Let's Play channel way back in 2008, so if you want to listen to me gush about the game more than I already have, or how crappy my microphone was back in the day, be sure to check it out. Final Fantasy IV is my Lord of the Rings. Before this game came out, video game stories were the purview of instruction manuals and opening text crawls. They were nice to have and to think about, but they didn't affect you that much while you were playing the actual game. But then Final Fantasy IV hit the scene with its deep plot and engaging dialogue and wonderful characters, and it blew my feeble little 5th grade mind right out the back of my skull. In the original Final Fantasy, killing the Fiend of Earth was exciting because it opened up new parts of the world to explore and more challenges to throw your party against. In Final Fantasy IV, it was exciting because of what it meant for the hero and his companions. Each new scene means plot twists and character development and a whole host of narrative goodness that other kinds of video games didn't or couldn't achieve. I liked FF1, but FF4 is the game that solidified my love of RPGs for many years to come. My personal mantra became, "Story is everything," which seems short-sighted in retrospect, but which helped me feel superior to the other kids at school who were busy playing shooters and sports games. It seems simplistic and quaint by today's RPG standards, but FF4 was the perfect game for the perfect time, and I'm really thankful to have had it, even though it led me to develop some bad habits. In a lot of ways, Final Fantasy V is the exact opposite of its predecessor. Its story is shallow and built mainly of dumb conveniences. The characters are locked in this bizarre competition to see who gets to be the comic relief, and the scenarios are mostly time-filling fetch quests, more akin to an 8-bit RPG than what I'd come to expect from the 16-bit era. For an RPG player whose mantra was "story is everything," FF5 wasn't very good. That being said, I came to appreciate the game for what it does well, namely its gameplay. The FF5 job system has enough diversity that you can play through the game a dozen times and never experience it the same way twice. For every obstacle the game throws at you, there are usually a few obvious good enough solutions, one or two really clever perfect solutions, and a dozen or more outside the box solutions, all available from your submenu. That kind of freedom lends itself to experimentation, which in turn leads itself to further challenges. The fourth time you play FF4, you're just going through the motions. You don't have a lot of control over what options you have at any given time. But your fourth time through FF5, you can say, "This time I'm gonna do it without magic," and all the old challenges suddenly take new shape. It's such a different experience that I don't at all feel bad for having two Final Fantasies back to back on my lists. It's entirely possible that you know Myst by its alternate title, that game with the goddamn piano puzzle. Well, I love that piano puzzle, and I love most of the rest of the puzzles in Myst too. Myst is, in fact, the first puzzle-based adventure game that I played to completion. It took my dad and I several weeks to work our brain muscles through the obtuse clues presented by the island and ages of Myst, and I honestly think I came out the other side as a better person. A good way to describe Myst is this: pure immersion. There's nothing on the screen that isn't also in the world. There's no HUD, no inventory screen, no overlays. All the buttons and gadgets and gizmos you see on screen are the same ones the protagonist is seeing in the game world. This level of immersion was unheard of in 1993, and it drives everything that makes Myst special. The first Myst puzzles I solved on my own were the island puzzles leading to the Selenetic Age linking book, and I can remember thinking, wow, that was incredibly hard. Is this really something that some games do? It was intriguing to a tiny brain that was more used to puzzles about maybe pushing a couple blocks, and I was impressed with myself that I managed to figure it all out without any help. Unlike my stupid friend who couldn't beat it without the stupid strategy guide, I'm way smarter than that guy. I didn't have to scour the 1994 release list because I already knew what my pick was going in, and so did all of you if you've been paying any attention to my channel for the past however many years. Super Metroid is, to this day, the gold standard of freeform, exploration-based platform action games. Games like Blaster Master, Kid Icarus, Strider, and 2 previous Metroid titles all played with these concepts before, but Super Metroid perfected them to such a level that modern games of this genre resemble it more than anything that came before. We call them Metroidvanias, but even that's misleading, considering the first Castlevania game of this style was itself just aping Super Metroid, right down to the blocky, fill-inable map. But as many variations on Super Metroid that have been tried, as many different developers who were inspired by its brilliance, none have yet surpassed it, not even its own sequels and spin-offs. Super Metroid was the first game I wanted to sit down and deconstruct. I devoted hundreds of hours to plumbing its secrets and pushing its boundaries, a tiny cog in a vast community that had popped up around it. That community exists to this day, and they're still continuing to find new things about the game, new ways to experience it. I feel the question of personal favorite game is a little too broad to be answered easily, and the answer is more likely to be a discussion rather than a statement, but catch me in an unguarded moment, and yeah, I'm willing to say Super Metroid is my favorite game ever.